Good morning and thank you for joining Locus today for our first virtualized FME World Tour webinar. My name is Ruby Donaldson and I'm the Business Development Director for Locus Australia. Some of you will be familiar with our usual in-person format, which is typically Safe Software representatives, presenters from Locus, our platinum partner here in Australia, and as well as other FME customer presentations. Today, in light of the social restrictions which are still in place, we have had to adapt like many of you. We've got something a little bit different today, but we think that we're still going to be delivering something of value virtually, whether you're an experienced user or new to FME. Last month, Safe Software delivered a full virtualized roadshow of their FME World Tour events. Admittedly, the time zone did make it difficult for Australians and New Zealanders to tune into that. But all that content is available on safe.com, and we'll be sending links as part of the presentation after this ends, so if you can catch up on that content. It was important for Locus that we didn't just rehash what was already available out in the marketplace. And so we got together as a team to evaluate the specific functionality and features that's been made available that we think is sort of best fits the real world use cases of our customers, based on obviously what we see on site and some of the support requests that come through. So we're just going to take a quick look at our agenda. So today we've got 3 speakers. We're going to be hearing from Kieran O'Donnell. Kieran will be covering FME Server Applications, the map picker functionality, and effective user parameter use. Following Kieran, we'll be hearing from Gary Nicholson, who's going to be talking about FME Server and the various automations from the past through to the new 2020 release. And then lastly, we'll be hearing from Darren, who will be talking about server versioning, managing AWS with FME Server, and different super cool AWS recognition service functions. Please use the GoToWebinar platform to ask any questions that you might have during the presentations. Each presenter will take a few moments once they're finished to answer questions, and then we will have a formal Q&A session once those presentations have concluded. So just send through any questions that you might have at any time. So these are just a little picture of all the presenters that you're going to hear from today. The first presenter that I'll hand over to is Kieran O'Donnell. Kieran has been with Locus for about 2 years now. He's an FME Certified Professional and trainer. He's best known for his unintentional Jared Leto impressions, and he can most likely be found creating FME workspaces in the farthest corners of the globe. Kieran is the youngest and most adventurous, and certainly one of the brightest people that we have in the Locus team. I'm just going to send that over to him.
Cool, thanks for that kind introduction, Ruby. Certainly parts of that I'd agree are true. I don't know about one of the brightest in the team, but I'd say definitely the youngest, and that kind of plays right into the presentation that I'd like to give you guys today, and that's around FME Server Applications and interactive data requests. A big part and kind of a running theme of what I like to do when I create solutions is to be as lazy as possible, and that really plays into that, I guess, young millennial generation that I belong to. I think that there's a lot of scope to improve the solutions that we do to completely automate things and take our hands off some of these things as technical experts and just sort of put it in the hands of the customers to actually interact with. So today I'd like to talk to you about why data requests are still a problem, and then talk to you about a really great solution, which is FME Server Applications. And I'll use 2 examples which are pretty common in anyone's sort of service desk queue around basically just a sort of a tedious data task. And I think that there's a really good solution out there, being FME Server Applications, where we can get away from actually having to perform these tasks and these functions in the future. So I'd like to open with this statement, and that's around data silos. So I believe that data silos will always exist until you can provide information to those who need it exactly when they need it. And I guess that comes down to the fact that we've always been looking at improving and I guess opening up these data silos that exist, and FME has been a great tool for that. But I guess the silo still exists until you can actually provide that information on demand, essentially. And that's still something which has been prevented by the fact that people aren't able to actually interact with the great software and the great tools that we have access to, because it feels like it's something that a technical expert needs. So yeah, here, are you still spending time on any sort of tedious data requests? Teams who are actually the gatekeepers to enterprise data are still tasked with that burden of capturing and distributing that data. And it's because customers are so far removed from that process. They feel that the maintenance of this data is a specialist role, despite the fact that data is actually integral to everyone's roles these days. I actually had a team leader in the past he gave a really good description about kind of on-demand services. And I found this one has always stuck with me in the sense, he always talked about it from a GIS perspective around maps and getting comfortable with using web mapping applications, which is just standard practice now. Whereas in the past, people used ArcMap. He said back in the day as well, we used to have typists, and you would write something up on paper, scribble it down, and then hand it over to a typist to actually type up. And I guess the kind of idea behind that now is almost laughable. The thought that you would write something on paper and then hand it over to a typist to do. And I guess that's kind of the direction that I'd like to head in with data, is that you no longer have to like kind of describe what it is that you want to actually extract that data and hand that over to a specialist to perform. You can actually just perform that yourself if you're a non-specialist or a non-technical worker. So I think, yeah, server apps are a really great solution for that. So yeah, my solution is use FME and let it take care of the work for you. So with that technology that's available, I don't think there's actually a need for analysts or technicians to perform any basic data-related tasks anymore. If there's a process which you have to perform on a regular basis, it follows a repeatable pattern, it has some sort of formulaic approach to it, always think about how you can design that solution that no longer requires your involvement. And how's that? FME Server Apps. I'm going to take you through 2 examples of FME Server Apps that demonstrate how you can build those solutions where the user can get to what they need exactly when they need it. These are 2 really common examples, and they're ones that they've always kind of been pain points for me. So right quite close to home, and I know that they're just kind of standard practice, but I'm sure you can think of many other examples which are more related to specific examples in your own workplace too. So a little bit on server apps, if you haven't come across them before. So FME server apps are an interface which allow you to run an FME server workspace without actually logging into FME server. And that's kind of, I guess, where that data silo exists, is that we have specialist skills and specialist technology where you can do so much. You've always wanted to kind of restrict the access because of the power that's within it. But I guess, yeah, allowing this interface so that people don't actually have to log into your FME server, but they can still leverage that power, I think is a really, really valuable enhancement to FME server. So they were only released last year in the 2019.1 release of FME server. So I haven't seen them used really extensively to date. And they support the use of user parameters to allow for that interactive experience. And I'm going to talk quite a bit about that or demonstrate it throughout the examples that I'll show you, but those are essentially a way that you really kind of both control and allow the interaction, but also restrict it so that it's still a good user experience as well. And they're accessed via a web page, and so I think that that's really valuable as well, because it means users of all skill levels can be comfortable with them. You don't have specialist software. Everyone's happy using a browser, so it does make them really easy, and I guess your users don't need to have a really good technical understanding or extensive training program to actually get value from a solution. So this has always been a problem for me, having to deal with this, particularly in, I guess, my earliest roles. It was in a local government that I was continually lumped with spreadsheets full of addresses. and these used to drive me insane. So your job, I guess, as a GIS analyst or a technician, but I guess this could be applied to anything. It's not just GIS. It's just kind of the background I come from. So I do like to draw on those examples. But yeah, turning spreadsheets of unformatted address strings into a map is pretty time consuming. It's pretty tedious. And I guess the results are often pretty poor as well. Inaccurate or incomplete results can frustrate the customer and the technician or the analyst who's performing the task. You've often got a pretty slow turnaround time because it does tend to be quite a low priority task. And there's a disconnect often between, sorry, I think I've just lost the slide there. Sorry, bear with me for just a sec. All right, I think I was going to sort of wrap that up there with the slides and go into a demo anyway, so that's not the end of the world. Where was I? Yeah, there's often a disconnect, between the customer and the process. So I'm going to show you just a really simple application that I've built, an FME Server app, and then I'll talk you through the workspace that backs it and how you actually go about creating it. So here I'll show you the interface of an FME Server application. And this is just the standard interface. I haven't done any customization, completely configuration solution. But I think the benefit that it has can be really valuable. So here I'll just show you how it works. A user would click to upload a file and choose which file they would like to be geocoded, which we know to be a geocode. So here I'm just going to select addresses.csv, and once that file uploads, I'm going to select that as our input. So my computer's running like a bit of a dog. I'm not quite sure it won't upload, but let's see if that wasn't uploaded. Maybe it's just not re-uploading. And then here I've got an option here to select which output I would like. And in this case, I've given the user an option to either ask for an output, which is a map or a spreadsheet. So that's a common task as well. Users have address strings and they want it shown on a map, or they'd like a spreadsheet of actual formatted addresses with lat longs. So I'm going to choose map output. And all going well, that will run. But while that runs, I'm just going to show you the workspace. So the workspace here, you can see is a very, very simple one. We've got a total of 6 transformers, a single reader, and 2 writers. So I think, that's a really key part of this, is it's not hugely complex scenarios, and doesn't have to be this really big task to actually justify a really good solution, because we can save so much time by, I guess, the repetitive nature of some of these tasks by not having to perform them anymore. So here I've got a CSV input, and this is controlled by a user parameter. So this is what is actually being input via that portal that we've just seen. So the file that a user uploads. We then use the geocoder transformer to actually turn that address string into hopefully an address and a point in space. In this case, I've just used a local government I know quite well services. I've just used their standard ArcGIS server geocoding service. But I've got another colleague, Mike Overdries, who has a really good service that uses other software. You can batch geocode sort of 500 addresses in a second or two. So, you know, you've got the option to do it with all sort of different levels of, I guess, enterprise software that you have available to you. All it does is take that address string, geocode it. If it can find an address, we'll treat it one way. If it can't find an address, we'll treat it another way. And then here, based on, again, the user's input, they have the ability, sorry, not the ability, it defines which output we'd like. So if they've selected a spreadsheet, we're going to send it to an Excel spreadsheet writer. If they've selected a map, which is obviously a fail in this case, we run it through the HTML report generator to create a map and a table, and then output that to an HTML file. So all going well, that should have run. And I'm just going to open that to show you what the map output looks like. And here we go. We've got a really simple, I guess this one's built on the Esri Leaflet JavaScript API. And this just geocodes all of the addresses that were in the original CSV. You can click on them and it'll show you, as well as a table down here with all of the original address strings, original address, whether it was found, and then the formatted address string. So if you had a really nice, I guess, postal address service, that would be really good to geocode against. And then the lat long, if I scroll right to the bottom, you'll see a couple here where the address wasn't found. As well as when you look at the map, you'll see these are all addresses on Carrington Street. And so there's a Carrington Street in this town's sort of close to the center. There's also Carrington Street up here. So if you're a user and you're interacting with this, you'd probably look at this and glance and say, these ones aren't correct. And as a result, go and rectify your input, which you wouldn't have the ability to really and know if it was correct as a technician or an analyst performing the task. So as far as the solution goes, I think it's a great interactive solution because the customer performs the task rather than a technician or an analyst. They can do it as and when required. So as soon as they want that address spreadsheet geocoded, they can go perform the task. There's no log a service request, wait for it to flow through, wait till priorities are assessed. As soon as you've got the information, you can, as a user, you could go and get the result you're looking for. There's also that feedback loop where the customer can see what worked and what didn't, so they can rectify those issues instantly and then run it again and get a completely perfect result. I think that's great because there's a connection between the customer and the process as well, and that gives a broader understanding of how spatial technology actually works. That's kind of always been something that bugs me as well, as it's kind of just seen as this little black box, and as a result, people don't invest in things like data properly. And so as a result, we're kind of lumped with a lot of data tasks which probably shouldn't be performed by technical specialists. I'll just quickly take you through another example, and that's data extracts. So despite those advancements in tech, data requests are still time consuming. And again, it's another one which leaves customers and technicians pretty unsatisfied. Again, slow turnaround, inaccurate results, and then format compatibility issues. Funnily enough, that sounds like a task for FME as well. So I'm just going to jump through again to another server application that I've created as well. And this one's, I think, really powerful, and it uses something new in FME 2020 as well, which is the map picker. This was a really, exciting enhancement, and it just, I guess, sort of continues to go down that path of enabling non-technical user interaction with an FME workspace, and also opening up spatial technology to people who don't have specialist skills or specialist software as well. So here I've just created a really, really simple data download portal. Again, another thing that just lands in service desk queues and takes a long time to filter down and to actually perform for what should be, in my view, a completely automated task where the user performs this. So here, so this runs all right. we click on the map icon and the geometry picker appears. My network's not great, so sorry, you'll have to bear with me with some of these load speeds as well. We've got, I think, 8 of us working from home in my house at the moment, so yeah, we certainly don't have the fastest network connection right now. So yeah, a user can come in, and as far as data downloads go, they obviously want to select an area where they actually want information. You know, you think it might be a surveyor, a property developer, someone who's doing a research project. It could be anything, and they just want to get the data in the format they need, and the coordinate system they need, and just the data sets that they're interested in. So in this case, you'd want them to be able to define something like a polygon or a box. And I'm just going to draw a polygon here around a couple of blocks. Click to finish. Confirm. And you'll see when I hit confirm, what updates in this box. It updates this text string. And this text string is, I think, GeoJSON, just to actually define what I just drew on the map. And we're going to pass that into a FME workspace in just a moment. I can then choose the data sets that I want to download. So in this case, I might want water mains, property boundaries, and I'll go with protected features. I'll leave contours because they are a bit large, so it'll just take a little while longer and probably grind my laptop to a complete halt as well. And then here I've defined what options a user would be able to export this to. So in this case, I've just put 4 pretty common ones, and I'll go with GeoJSON because that's nice and clean because it only has 1 file. They're all geometry types and all feature types as well. And then the ability to also choose the output coordinate system. In this case, I'm going to stick with NZTM because the data I'm pulling from is in New Zealand. But yeah, you've got the ability to define set coordinate systems that you might want any of your users to actually be able to export this data in. Now, I'm going to hit that off to run because my computer takes a little while, so I'd like to get it running while I show you this workspace. And then I'll show you actually what's going on behind the scenes here. Hopefully when I see it running, ideally. I'll leave that anyway. So my second workspace, again, it's not the most complicated one. It is a little more complex than the last one I just showed. But again, I don't think there's anything particularly advanced. So it should be something that will, users of all skill levels are comfortable actually creating. It's fairly straightforward in what it does. And again, it just uses user parameters quite effectively, I think. So here we initiate it with a creator, fetch one of the user parameters, and then we split that into a list with our attribute splitter, and then explode that into its own individual elements. So in that case, where we had the user selecting things like contours, property boundaries, we actually just want to get one individual feature so that I can trigger the feature reader to only read the data sets which we actually want to download in this case. So here, that then passes it through to whether it's water mains, our property boundaries, protected trees, and actually only reads the ones we want. Up the top here, this is what I really like to show you as well, is our location user parameter. And that location is actually the input that we chose using that map picker functionality. So what that feeds in is that text string, which is actually coming through. Sorry, I haven't got that anymore, but that text string that was actually defined as a result of using that map functionality, it feeds that in and creates a bounding box to perform a clip essentially. And I'll just show you the geometry the location parameter is a type of geometry, which is brand new. So I'll just show you that by editing the definition. So you can see here I've set the type to geometry. So yeah, that's brand new in 2020. I've selected a prompt to let the user know that they need to draw the area of interest. And then here in the configuration, you have the ability to define what geometry type a user can use, whether that's point, line, box, polygon. In this case, it's a data download portal, so there probably wouldn't be much sense in using a point or a line, but a box or a polygon makes a lot more sense. If you had something more like you're building something like, I guess, like a before you dig permit system and you had a site, you could maybe use a point and then do something like a buffer operation instead on top of that. So yeah, there's a lot of different options, but do just think very carefully about what you want the user to be able to do with the app that you're setting up. And then you also specify the initial bounds for that map display so that they are actually starting at an area of interest, which actually relates to, I guess, the data that's backing this process as well. Cool. So we created a box with that, and I'll just show you how that works. I've got the default value in here, and when I go run this, just to this point here, what you'll see using our visual preview window is we've actually just got a box that's been drawn, and that's passed from that text. So then we just do some coordinate reprojection, and then we feed it into our clipper, and that ultimately just clips all of our features to the input location. I know some of the users out there will be thinking, why haven't you fed that in as a feature, as a clip extent using the spatial filter here? I actually did try that. That was my intention as well, because it would work a lot nicer. I'm actually using an open data service here because I haven't got anything hosted on this machine. I'm actually just reading directly an ArcGIS Online site with a GeoJSON file, and it actually turned out it was faster to clip it up, to read all of the features and then clip it than to clip each one. I'm not sure. So I guess that's just a reminder to actually not go with your gut of what you think will be faster when you're building a customer portal as well, but actually test what is faster, because something like this, you want it to work really quickly for a user who's interacting with it as well. And then here we do a filter for the output. So again, just another parameter. So we're going to filter for the output to go to the correct writer as well. Here, this could be a little cleaner. I could use something like a generic writer and allow them to define types, but you do run into some issues with, I guess, multiple geometry types versus single geometry types. Something like AutoCAD or GeoJSON, you can support all geometry types within a single writer, but for something like a geodatabase or a shapefile, they can only support a single geometry type. So you do have to be careful about how you define those as well. So here I've gone with, a writer for each, a feature type for each different geometry type in the geodatabase and shapefile, but just a single file for an AutoCAD or a GeoJSON one. So then I publish that up through FME Server, and I'll show you actually what needs to be done on FME Server afterwards as well. All right, I am just conscious of the time here, and I'm not quite sure what's going on here. But yeah, ultimately what has happened in the background is that workspace has been run after interacting with that interface. It's passed it through there using the input, and then as a result, that download link, which we saw and never got to actually invoke, has created a zip file with a clip of the data. I think I have one here which I could open up for you. Yeah, here's an old one. Just unzip it. There we go, output.json. Now if I opened up FME Data Inspector and just dragged it on, you'll see it's picked up its GeoJSON. I say okay. We've got a nice clip of property features or water mains alternatively. There we go. And that's in a CDD here. Whew, she really isn't happy. Cool. I'm just gonna leave that there, and if any questions come through around something that I probably haven't shown you, hopefully by the end, this is responding a little bit better as well. Cool. So yeah, sorry about that, but hopefully we can get some time at the end to maybe loop around to that if anything hasn't been covered. So yeah, I'd just like to reiterate, this is just a really simple but I think effective solution. The ability for users to actually extract data on demand eliminates that lengthy wait time and can leave your customers more satisfied. A big part of, I guess, the trouble is that people get frustrated with having to wait for things when it should be a really simple task. And some of these are simple tasks. It's just the sheer quantity that actually come through that sort of cause that bottleneck because it always has to sit with the technician or an analyst. So customers have that power to define exactly what they want, and that removes the possibility for errors and exports, and those frustrate both the customer and the technician. If the customer doesn't get the data first time around, they get annoyed, and if the technician or the analyst has to do it a second time around, they kind of get frustrated. It's just much easier to sort of cut that whole step out of it altogether. So using FME Server Apps, you unlock that power of FME to an end consumer, and that removes any potential data compatibility issues. So if you're a large organization where you've got sort of some centralized enterprise data and it's always housed in a single sort of format or in a single coordinate system, but you know it needs to sort of get translated between those, this is a really good solution for that, where you can provide it in a different format and a different coordinate system without actually having to do that work yourself. You can let whoever needs it get it whenever. So just to sum up, FME Server Apps are the interactive link between your workspaces and the customer. Allowing your customers to actually run processes themselves saves you time, but it also yields more accurate results. And I think that really improves the level of customer service that you're actually providing. By utilizing FME Server Apps well, you eliminate the need to perform repetitive data tasks yourself. That's what I'm all about. And then it frees up the time to deliver even more value-add services. So it's not about just shirking responsibility or not wanting to actually perform work. It's knowing that you have a technical skill set and actually being able to apply that to really valuable technical problems instead of kind of doing the bread and butter because it is data that your sort of area holds. So a few last tips for creating server apps. This all relates to one thing, and that's thinking of the customer. So I would recommend using simple, non-industry specific language. And that includes no jargon or acronyms, which includes FME and GIS. I've always had that sort of issue as well, as soon as someone hears the word GIS or FME, it's just a black box and no one really understands it, no one wants to. GIS is just maps at the end of the day, and FME is a data integration platform. So if you can just talk about, extracting data or creating a map, I think that goes a lot further when you've got that plain language. It sort of helps people to not switch off and to actually believe that it's something that they can do, not something you should do. And user parameters for both interaction and restriction. So you see with those things like choosing your output file type or choosing a coordinate system, you want people to be able to choose that, but you want to be able to restrict that as well so that only things that will work actually can be entered. So using drop-downs or drop-downs with aliases, that's a really good way to approach that as well. Certainly not free text. Using the most appropriate FME service is also key. So some of those, I know we're used to using job submitters as just the standard. So that's kind of, it's just running a workspace. For a data download portal, the data download service makes sense. For something like that map that I showed you at the start, returning geocoded addresses, a data streaming service would work a lot better. So just think about what's most appropriate for what you're trying to deliver to a customer as well. And like anything, invest in documenting your solution well. That will help people be more comfortable with it, and as a result, hopefully use the solution that you build as well. So I'll just leave you with this. There's no need to perform repetitive data tasks yourself. Let FME and your customer take care of it. You can be a facilitator, but there's no need for you to actually perform those tasks yourself anymore. So think about what tasks can you automate completely. I'm gonna hand over to Ruby now, but thanks everyone for listening, and I will take a look at the questions as well, just to see if there's anything while I'm still on that I could answer.
And there's just one question in the chat. Can you pass the geometry into the feature reader to filter the data before it gets into the workspace to be more efficient?
Yes, you can. Sorry, I think I touched on that briefly, but probably didn't do a great job of explaining. That was, the services that I'm actually utilizing there are hosted in ArcGIS Online. And so I was doing that originally, but the issue that I was having was it actually took longer as a result. I'm not sure if that's because it was kind of making a request each time to actually see per feature whether it was actually inside or outside. Whereas when I just load a whole lot in, it's like it loaded into temp memory. I think it's just mostly to do with the fact that my server is sitting on this local machine, and that data is housed in ArcGIS Online. It's probably in Australia, maybe. So yeah, it's just a I guess a speed thing. So actually do check out which is faster and which is more efficient for what you're working with. But I know that most enterprise scenarios, you would definitely be best to actually filter that with the input on load as well. Yeah. Oh yeah, we've got another one here from a Mike, and that is around authentication. That was something that I was hopefully going to be able to show you as well. So this was a new release in 2020 as well. So last year in the initial release, it was purely public, the server applications, and there was no authentication. Whereas now you actually have the ability to restrict them. So you could have some that are public facing, and you could have some that are maybe users or trusted users. So you can control all that within the console as well, and define who has access to which server applications too.
Okay, thanks, Kieran. So before I hand on to the next presenter, we're just going to have a quick look at some readers and writers that are now available in the 2020 release. So each year, obviously, Safe Software makes a few enhancements and some additions. So this year is no different. One of the things to note are the speed improvements for the shapefiles, Excel, and OGC GeoPackage readers and writers, along with connection improvements in ArcGIS Pro, including the Ezra utility network and annotations. So there's quite a few new additions in this release. So if there's anything that you have questions about, or you just need general support, please do reach out to us. We'd be happy to help. Next up for you, we have FME Server and Desktop Certified Professional Gary Nicholson. Gary has been with Locus since its inception about 12 to 13 years ago. And not many people can claim to have the level of expertise with FME Server that Gary possesses. So he's kind of our go-to man for literally everything. So we're quite lucky that he's very nice and very patient. In his spare time, Gary is usually developing cool FME solutions for charities like Oxfam. And he's also an avid runner. So he's built a number of apps. One notable is Podium, which you can find on the Apple platform. So without further delay, Gary, if you're, sorry. Here we go.
Okay. Right, so I'm going to be talking about FME Server and the various ways where we can automate workspaces, how it's changed in the last few years, and hopefully a bit about where it's headed. Kieran has just covered the FME apps side of things, so I won't go into that, but I'll show some other work that SAFE have been doing around automations. So they're really working on taking automations to the next level and bringing support for enterprise integration patterns into FME. The FME Server, right from the beginning, it's been about automating workspaces. When I first started, it was just FME desktop, and there were limited scopes for automating your workflow. You'd get a request in from someone wanting a workspace run, you'd have to load up FME desktop, run the workspace, send the data back to them. With FME Server, it's all about self-service, like Kieran has just shown, or scheduling workspaces. It is possible to schedule in FME desktop using Windows Task Scheduler, but it's a bit of a pain in the neck. And things like automating when emails come in, that's just not possible with FME desktop. So FME Server, its whole reason to exist is to automate. And there's various ways it can automate things. We've got Workspace Runner, where one workspace can trigger off another workspace. That was one of the first automation tools available in FME Server. In fact, several years ago, I developed a quite complex workflow where one master workspace ran about 30 other workspaces in FME Server with rules about when one could be run. You had to wait for previous workspaces. And Kieran's just taken over managing that particular workspace, so I'd be interested to see how he's taken that and used the new automations methods, or if he's still using the workspace runners. After the workspace runners, we had a system around topics and notifications and subscriptions. This sort of decoupled parts of your workflow, and I'll show you how this works. It's still available, as is workspace runners, and it does work, but it is quite complex, and even I have trouble getting my head around it at times. I need to go and see exactly what a notification is and what a subscription is, but it's still there. The next level, which started to come out last year, is the automations, which does use the topics system underneath, but it adds a graphical user interface to it. So it's a lot easier to see what's going on and create your workflows. Then schedules, that's pretty simple. You schedule a job to run every hour, every day, however often you want it. So I won't cover that, it's been there for quite a while. Webhooks allows a external system to trigger workflows. Again, that's been there really from the beginning of FME Server. You had a way of running workspaces through a webhook. But again, they are making that easier to use. Server apps we've just seen. And one thing Kieran didn't mention is you can also run these server apps in FME Data Express, which is a app either for your iPhone or Android, and you can run your workspaces through there. And it almost turns these workspaces into a native app. And then there's a FME Server API if you really want to integrate workspaces with your custom workflows. There's APIs available too. But today I'm going to be covering the top three: workspace runners, notifications, topics, subscriptions, and the automations, particularly the new features that are available in automations. So SAFE, when they're thinking about what road to travel down with these automations, they are using a book called Enterprise Integration Patterns. An enterprise integration, a pattern is a repeatable solution to a commonly occurring problem encountered when integrating applications or systems. The pattern is a template for how to solve a problem that occurs in many situations. The Bible around enterprise integration patterns is this book called Enterprise Integration Patterns by Gregor Hope and Bobby Wolf. And it provides some 65 common enterprise integration patterns. And SAFE are trying to make sure that the FME system, the FME desktop and FME server, can manage as many of these 65 integration patterns as possible. I'll show you the website for this book shortly and show you some of the patterns that they have there. But why don't I go to that now? So this is the homepage for enterprise integration patterns. The hard copy of the book's quite expensive, so I obviously don't have that, but the Kindle version of it's around $40 or $50 or so. But we can have a look at this page of the various integration patterns that they cover. You can see things like message filter. How can a component avoid receiving uninteresting messages? In a FME context, let's say some sort of filter, a tester or a test filter. You can get rid of messages coming in that you're not interested in. Dynamic routing, recipient list, how do we route a message to a list of dynamically specified recipients, or splitter or aggregator. You can see the words and concepts, they fit in with FME really well. So even out of the box, a lot of these things are compatible with FME. SAFE are making sure that FME server in particular can cover as many of these as possible. I quite like the look of this one, message broker. How can you decouple the destination of a message from the sender and maintain central control over the flow of messages? The way I think things are heading is having workspaces which are almost a microservice. It just does one job really well. And when you come to create your workflow, you just join up all of these microservices to do it. So in a sense, it's similar to joining up a workspace with transformers, but each workspace itself becomes a step of this workflow. So I'd like the idea of decoupling steps along the flow, just have one workspace concentrating on doing what it's good at, and then joining multiple workspaces up into a flow. And I think that's the way the automations is heading. We'll come to that in a second. But back to the original FME server, and one of the first ways to automate things was the job submitter. So for this demo, I've got two simple workspaces. I'm going to have one call the other. The first workspace is this one here. All it does is create 10 features. Each feature gets a random number between 0 and 100. And it's going to pass that number off to the second workspace. So using the FME Server Job Submitter, pretty simple, creator, random number generator, and the FME Server Job Submitter that links into the other workspace, which has been submitted up to FME Server, and it runs it and passes the number through as a published parameter. But this is still a particularly useful way of passing data from one workspace to another via published parameters. But it's not very decoupled in that this workspace needs to know about the other workspace. So even though it still works, it's not particularly flexible, but it's still useful. I'm going to have a chat with Kieran to see if he's still using this concept later on over a beer with that 30 workspaces. For the receiving workspace here, I'm not doing anything special. I'm just creating a feature using the parameter fetcher to fetch the incoming number. I'm squaring that and writing a small sentence saying the square of this number is this number and logging that. So the whole concept here is to show how the data moves from one workspace to the other rather than doing something complex with it. The second option I'm going to show, I'll go through the slides quickly and then swap over to FME Server. The next system of automating, which Safe introduced, is the notifications and topics system. So under this scenario, the first workspace doesn't need to know about the second workspace. It just generates the number and passes it off to the topic in using a FME Server notifier transformer. So we could have multiple subscriptions listening into that topic. Whenever this workspace sends a number through to the topic, multiple actions can happen. So this workspace doesn't actually need to know what's going to happen to that number when it's created it. So this is coming back to that microservices concept. This workspace, all it needs to know is how to generate a random number and pass it on. The receiving workspace, it listens into that topic and it reads the data coming in through either a text file reader, which I'm using in this case. Quite often though, the data you pass through between workspaces will be in a JSON format. So I'd have a JSON reader in there. But once the data is in, again, just square the number and log it out. So these two are triggered, tied together by the topic rather than one getting fired directly by the other. And finally is the FME Server Automations writer. This is new in FME 2020, and I think it's going to make a huge difference in how automations can be wired together. I'm quite excited when I get the first job that's going to make proper use of this. There's always plenty of stuff I can go back and rewrite to use the automations, but the next time I get a job that needs it, I'm looking forward to using it. So in this case, instead of the topic notifier, we've got a new writer format called an automations writer. And it's just like any other writer. It's got a feature type here, which passes the random number through. But the beauty of this is you can pass through multiple attributes. And again, it's decoupled. This workspace doesn't know exactly what's going to use the number once it's spat out of the automations writer. And if we have multiple feature types here, which I'll show you later, where I've split the random number into 10 different values depending on its range. You'd have multiple automations writers feature types here, and there'll be multiple ports coming out. So keep an eye out for that later. Now this does use the topics system under the hood, but it's well hidden and you don't actually need to know about it now. And this is the graphical user interface for building the automations workflows. So you can see it's pretty similar to actually building an FME workspace in desktop. And now I'll swap over to FME Server and we'll show you these three concepts. So first one is the workspace that creates 10 random numbers. So a creator transformer here creates 10. And if you haven't used FME for a couple of versions, this is the workspace viewer, which allows you to view the workspace in FME Server. So you don't have to download it to FME Desktop and view the workspace. You can view it directly in FME Server now. The random number generator is generating random number between 0 and 100, putting the result into underscore random number. And the FME Server Job Submitter sends it off to this next workspace. So in this case, it's not decoupled because this workspace needs to know that it needs to send the data off to log number underscore 1 workspace. But the parameter it's sending it off to is underscore random number. So if I actually run this workspace, you should see in the job log, this workspace will run. It'll pass 10 features off to this FME Server Job Submitter. So this job should run 10 times. So let's fire that off and run. Now if I go over to the jobs log, so I haven't run anything since yesterday. If I refresh that, first job that ran today was the random numbers generator one, and then 10 times the log workspace. If I go in here, we'll see where I've logged. The number coming in is 7, no, it's a square. Number coming in is 88. The square of that is 744. So we've got a result saying the square of 88 is 7744. Just show you briefly that receiving workspace, which is pretty simple, this one. So the creator parameter fetcher, which gets that random number from the incoming published parameter. Attribute creator squares the number and creates that result text, and it's just sent to a logger. So that's the workspace runner. Second version is using the notifications system. So here, if I come into automations and notifications, we can see I've created a topic called random. Now, topic by itself doesn't really do much. It's just a name that something gets triggered. Publications and subscriptions are tied into topics. So this is where I have to keep coming into here and going new and having a look at the protocol. I'm looking at publications. By looking at the protocol, I can see we've got email, directory watch, UDP, WebSocket. I need to keep coming in here to see, okay, a publication is something that triggers off a workflow. Like with directory watch, a directory could have a file put into it that will fire off this publication, which in turn will trigger a topic. So we could trigger off a sample topic. Then the other part of that is subscriptions, which listen into a topic. Again, come into new and have a look at the protocol. These are events that could be triggered by a topic. So email, this will be sending an email out. Dropbox, putting a file onto Dropbox. HTTP request could be to trigger another system through a webhook. A lot of the time though, we use FME Workspace. So when a topic is triggered, an FME Workspace will be run. So I'll come in here and you can see here I've set up a subscription called Square Number that runs this workspace, log number _2, when this topic is triggered. So that's how those are tied together. Where was I? Need to go back to workspaces. This is running, oops, not number 3, onto 2. So this is the one that's going to fire off the topic 10 times. There we go, that's run. So if we go back into the jobs log, we should see another 10 workspaces triggered here. And we can see this time that it's been triggered, that second workspace has been triggered by the square number workspace subscription. So this workspace sent a message to the topic 10 times. Each time the topic was triggered, this workspace was run. So both of those have been available up until now. Now we'll move on to the automations version of this. So again, the workspace is similar, but now we've got an automations writer in here with just one feature type. So now we can come into the automation side, and instead of having to tie things together by topics, we've got a graphical user interface to build workflow. So if we come down here, we can drag in triggers, just like building a workspace. And you'll see here the same options are available that we just saw in publications because it is tied together, but now it's a graphical interface to it. So in this case, we've got the FME server topic. So let's get rid of that. The action, run a workspace. We can merge messages, log a message, or filter messages. And most of the time, we're going to be running a workspace. And then if we wanted to, we can run the external actions, which was subscriptions under the notifications thing. So similar options here. And what I've got for this one is listening for an FME server topic. Once that gets triggered, it runs that first workspace, which generates the random numbers. And you can see down here, we've got an output port where that random number will come out of. That's the feature type from the automations writer. And the output of that will be that random number. It's going into a second workspace, which is that logging number 1. Because it's coming through as a published parameter, I can use that same first workspace that we used originally. The reason I've got the FME topic here is because there's actually no way to, I can start the automation, and now it's going to sit there ready for something to trigger it. There's not actually an option here to say, go, start running this workspace. So what I've done is set up another FME server topic here. It's called run random 3. I can now go over to here in topics, and I can trigger the topic from here manually. And once I've done that, I should be able to go into jobs and have a third set of 10 workspaces. And we can see that it's been triggered by automations at this time. So, oops, that's server apps, we don't want that. No, let's just go into build automations quickly, and Now to load up a workspace, this one here, you can see here I've built a workspace that splits off the random number into 10 different ports depending on its value. So as you can imagine, in that particular workspace, it's just a attribute range filter, filtering off into 10 different automations writer. And now I can do different actions depending on what the random number is. So you can imagine how data coming in can trigger off different actions depending on what the values are. And if we go back to the PowerPoint, there's an example where different data coming in from here goes up this way if it's one particular value. If it's another value, it comes down here. One way triggers an email. Down here, data gets recorded. Another bit here that is run on a schedule. So we can start building quite complex automations. Now, talking about complex automations, there is an option in here to enable looping. When you click that, it says enable loops and automations is an advanced feature. Care must be taken. I encourage you to read this, enable loops, then go back and read it 10 more times, because what can happen, I've now got the ability to drag that loop back into there, drag that loop back into there. If I happen to save that and start it, when I triggered this workspace off, any number between 41 and 50 would send a feature out here. It would come back through here, back into here, would run this workspace again. That would fire off 10 more numbers coming out of here. If another one came through that port, it would run this off, and so on and so forth. And you'd end up in an endless loop. And I'm talking from experience here. When FME Cloud first came out, I was playing with the topics, subscriptions, and notification system. I ended up having one workspace trigger itself as soon as it finished. And I didn't realize at the time until I got an email from SAFE saying, yeah, do you realize this is bringing the machine to a halt and costing quite a bit of money? So if you're going to enable looping, please be very careful and understand what you're doing. It is going to be quite powerful though. I've been doing a lot of work with Xero API lately, and pulling data from their API requires looping because it just gives, I think, 200 results at a time and then tells you there's more available. So I need to loop through until I've got all of the data, which I'm just doing in a custom transformer at the moment, but it would be easy to do looping for that as well to make sure I've got all of the results. But just be very careful if you do try and use looping in automations that you don't end up in an endless loop, particularly if you're using FME Cloud where it does cost money. I think I'm coming to the end, but while I'm in FME Server, I'll just show you two more new features of FME 2020. As an administrator, you can do broadcast messages. Oops, I don't want to do that. So you can create a broadcast message saying reboot or so on. Cutting down now. Severity is critical. If I said that, everyone that's logged into FME Server will get a message pop up on their screen saying, I'm going to reboot. Well, you see there's other levels as well. So an info could warn people that you're going to be doing an upgrade in a week's time, warning something a bit more critical. So broadcast messages are available now. And the other cool thing, under Manage Workspaces, we can now actually upload an FMW file. Probably shouldn't show you all my workspaces. You now upload FMW files directly into FME Server. You don't need to publish them from FME Desktop. Obviously, that's not going to work if you need to upload connections or data, but we can now upload FMW files. So you could potentially download a workspace from FME Hub and just upload it into FME Server without even having to use desktop, which could be quite exciting, particularly with FME Cloud, and maybe decoupling of FME Server and FME Cloud. So with that, I'll pass back to Ruby.
Thank you, Gary. Gary, we've actually got a couple of questions for you. The first one, is there any reason you would still use topics subscriptions when you have automations?
Personally, I wouldn't. It's so much easier to use. But if you've already got one that's running on the topics and notifications, it's going to keep working. But anytime I have something new come along, I can't see myself using the topics and notifications. But having said that, it may crop up that I need to, but certainly for now, the automations is going to be my go-to.
Okay. And it's unclear if this question is for you. I think it is. Can you limit the size of the area a user can select? Came in quite early.
I think that sounds like there's more to do with Kieran's presentation with the map.
Kieran.
Yes, I think.
Okay.
And I don't think there is at this stage, but I think I'd imagine it might come in the future.
Yeah, I suspect that once you've got the geometry into your workspace, you can do some analysis and make sure it's not the size of a country, and then turn a error message saying that's big. Whether it's available in the front end, probably not at the moment. But you can also always use the API and create your own front end that has that logic in it. I suspect the built-in front end at the moment does, but it would have to move it into the workspace.
Okay. All right, thank you, Gary. So people have actually made comments to me in the past that World Tour events are very FME server centric, and that not everyone can afford FME server. So it's probably a good time just to mention that over the past year or so, Safe Software have actually developed quite a few different new pricing models. Some of them are industry specific, but they are also moving more towards a subscription-based model as well, which isn't industry specific. And so we've been spending a lot of our time in COVID-19 lockdown doing sort of presentations for various customers about how they can expand the use of FME beyond traditional use cases, like GIS, so that they can better get more value, well, so they can derive more value from moving to a subscription model. We're getting some really good feedback from people about the pricing and the way that it's set out. So if you are looking at growing your organization into FME, or you're sort of starting out, it's definitely worth exploring your options for models beyond the perpetual licensing model. So our next speaker today is going to be Darren Fergus. So thanks for hanging in there with us. We literally leave Darren to the end for a reason. His exuberant personality and passion for FME makes it really difficult for someone just to not pay attention. He's an FME certified professional. He's also a certified trainer. He gets incredibly good feedback for his training, and he spends a lot of his time on a plane traveling to Australia to help me. So thanks, Darren. And when he's not doing that, he's dedicated to his second love in life, his business Extreme X, which is a luxury car experience, which he never talks about. You can pick up the sarcasm there. So anyway, the best thing to
never talk about it at all.
Totally. Please welcome Darren Fergus.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Yeah, Ruby, thank you very much for the awesome introduction. Passionate me, certainly not. No, I'm probably one of the few Scotsmen that certainly don't have any passion in their bones. Let me just show my screen, 2 seconds. Here we go. Okay, so hopefully you can see my face twice. Yeah, so thanks once again, Ruby. I think this is really quite exciting in some ways to be able to present to everybody in this crisis. You know, like there's all sorts of things going on in the world, and yet we're able to band together and share stories. And we're kind of lucky this didn't happen 10 years ago, because I'm pretty sure GoToMeeting wouldn't have held up back then. I don't even know if GoToMeeting was around then, but yeah, so anyways, Ruby kind of touched on a little bit about what I do. Yeah, I'm a trainer, I'm a desktop professional. Does that mean I know everything? Absolutely not. But I actually love the dynamics of working in New Zealand, coming over to Australia, and actually it's really interesting to see that the common problems between organizations and the things they're trying to do to solve them, and actually how you can solve problems in many different ways. And being the guy in the middle that's able to pass and relay that information around the different organizations and departments and stuff, and be able to share how to best optimize things and other people's experiences. I feel really blessed and lucky to be in that situation, to be honest with you. One of the reasons I love being a trainer, because actually when you make lots of mistakes, you learn lots of things, and it's a good place to be in. Anyway, so getting on with things, I'm going to be talking to you for roughly the next 25-30 minutes. I got 3 topics that I'm going to be covering off. One of them is, or the one that we're starting with, is the importance of versioning. And really this is focused primarily at those of you that have FME Server but haven't got versioning enabled on that. And also those of you that really want something to be able to do versioning with, but you don't have a server license. So don't worry, I've got you guys on this one. We'll cover off the details as we come through. And yeah, I make mention of autosave gotcha. So just something to be aware of. And look, at the end of the day, many of the mistakes that we make when we're doing things is really kind of bad practice. You know, it's laziness. But at the end of the day, with versioning in, it helps you resolve or mitigate the risks on so many different things there. So yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. And then we're going to talk about FME and unconventional thinking. Oh, look, unconventional, maybe not, but at the end of the day, FME is a big ship and it has so much functionality, and there's so many cool tools in that, and so many transformers, and so many different ways to do the same thing and do different things, right? And I think FME sometimes gets, it disappears in the big mass of all the problems that we solve. We're always thinking big, right? And what I want to do is I want to simplify some of the things that we can do with FME. And one of those tasks is focused towards AWS. I use AWS all the time. I use it for implementing training machines. And I'm going to show you how to use FME in the command line to help deal with some of the quirks that you get with AWS, but more importantly, help save you money, all right? Because we all like to save money. I'm Scottish, I like to save money. And then lastly, the super cool AWS recognition service, right? And all I'm going to say on that is it's all fun and games, or is it? So the importance of versioning with FME Server, the why. Okay, so you know, this is problem 101. Every organization, deals with it in a host of different ways, right? But in an ideal world, you know, if you want to protect your production environment, you usually go with a model that, well, one, you've got staff that are skilled and have good processes, and you know, you remove the risks to the production environment in that way. And then secondly, you know, you've got plenty of money to throw at. You have a production server, you have a user accepted production environment, user accepted testing environment, and a development environment, right? And that solves all your problems, that mitigates all the risk. Absolutely not. Of course, we know that. You know, there's sometimes there's variations between a production environment and a development environment and so on. So it doesn't resolve all problems, right? But of course, we're talking about this from an FME perspective. And this is issue 101 with most organizations. So let's talk about some of the things that can go wrong with FME, and maybe why it would be good to have something like a version tool for our workspaces. So number one, accidentally killing a workspace. Okay, you might say to yourself, how do you kill a workspace? Well, trust me, I've definitely done that in the past, right? Some of it's through stupidity, some of it's through mistakes, and some of it's through accidents and all sorts. There's a whole host of reasons that you can kill a workspace, right? But let's take a simple analogy. Some user comes in, they're new to perhaps FME, and they want to go and have a go in your production environment. Yeah, of course, you shouldn't do that, but they open up a workspace, they make some changes, they don't save a copy, they leave it running in the production environment. Hey presto, your production comes to a crash and halt, and that has an impact on all the other systems. Somebody else comes in to try and resolve it. There's no documentation of what the changes are. There's no copy to roll back to that can, get things going again. So it's a big issue, right? And then option number two, maybe somebody's a little bit smarter than that. Maybe they go into the production environment, they open up a workspace, they make some changes, perhaps they're changing some values, perhaps they're optimizing it. Maybe even they go further and they do some testing and they have put a sampler in there and they test every 1 in 1,000 records. It all works good and they're happy and they're all proud, and then they publish that up to their production environment. Boom. Off goes the schedule in the evening, it comes to a crash and halt again, right? And that's great. Somebody else comes in, they look at what went wrong, and then they have to debug the workspace, right? Undo the things that were done because there wasn't a copy made there, right? And these are just a couple of examples, right? Hopefully there's systems in place at different places to help prevent some of these things from happening, but hopefully you get the idea. And then lastly, the which workspace version nightmare. Right, you tell me, you show me somebody that's not been in an organization that hasn't gone, oh my God, which workspace is it? But there's these workspaces everywhere. There are different folders, different versions, different naming conventions, a whole host of things, right? It's just a nightmare. And I absolutely see some of these things when I'm on site. Even the changes of naming convention from a development environment to a production environment, etc. One's got a date on it, one's got a version number on it. Which one are you going by? It's really hard to manage. And this is where versioning comes in really handy. So look, desktop and server, they're built for this, right? They're built to allow you to do really awesome things across your organization, integrations, GIS, transformations, translations, and all those different types of things. But more importantly, they're built for each other. They're made for each other, okay? So think of, server's the thing that delivers all the information to everybody and allows you a whole host of enterprise type functionality. And then desktop is this thing where you create the automation behind it. You create the function and the processes behind it, and you publish that up there. But more importantly, think of desktop as a client to server, all right? So, and with desktop being a client to server, what that means is you can do cool things, right? It's not really cool, but it's things that are useful, right? So for example, you can publish up a workspace, you can republish a workspace, and you can download a workspace, right? We're going to forget about republish for a minute, and let's talk about the main ones, and that's publish and download, okay? So when you develop a workspace or you build a workspace and you have versioning enabled on your FME, when you publish that up there and you use the functionality commit, what that means is you now have created a version within FME server of that workspace, right? And again, you still need processes, you need standards, so that person needs to know what information they're going to provide. Maybe this is the first edition, maybe they're going to talk just a brief note on what the functionality is, and that prepares it for the second person that's going to make changes, right? So let's go through the process of this. So a person publishes that workspace up there, they commit it, it's version number 1, let's just make it nice and simple. New user comes in and goes, right, I'm pretty sure I can optimize this workspace. I'm going to download that workspace now. So they open up their desktop application, they download the workspace, and either make some modifications to it. Right, let's go back to that thing earlier on. Remember when they accidentally mess up the workspace or they break it? Well, they can do that here, because when they download it, you see, they're downloading a copy of that workspace to the local machine, which goes into their documents, FME, and workspaces, right? So they can break it, they can kill it, they can delete it by accident. they can copy it to another location, and they can always download a new copy, right? So that's issue resolved number one, okay? Are they working on the right space? Absolutely, right? Because they downloaded it from FME, so it's got the right naming convention. Anyway, so they make their changes and they do their optimization, and they got to publish that back up to FME. Now you might be going, darn, I've caught, yeah, because they're going to do republish. No, because when you download the workspace the first time, you have to publish it up before you can. Once you've published up, then you can republish. Once you're in that cycle, but the first time you redo it, you have to publish it. So yeah, so the great thing about this is now they can publish this, commit it, and now we'll have a secondary version in FME Server. Okay, and what that means is if there's any problems, whether they've done the correct testing or not, or whether they've made a mistake, it means now that you can go into FME Server and you can select the previous version, roll back to that, and get your production environment up and running, or whichever environment you're running on. But more importantly, then you can take the other version and you can try and troubleshoot what's wrong with that. Okay, so those of you that have FME Server and you're licensed, you should absolutely tick that box versioning and put processes in place with your users within your organization, how you're going to manage it, how you're going to name things, and really use that, because at the end of the day, it's wasted if you're not. And then secondly, for those of you that want versioning, but you know what, you don't have money for an FME server license, don't worry about that, because you know what, Safe Software are an awesome company, right? They really think about all these things. They've actually made the FME server so you do not need a license. That's right, you do not need a license to be able to do versioning with FME Server, okay? So that is completely free, so you can install FME Server on your production environment, right, or whatever environment that you want, just as a repository tool so that you can version all your workspaces, okay? So look, I'm not going to go into the details how you go about all doing that. So if you've got any questions on that, send me an email and I'll send you instructions on what you need to be able to do to set that all up, okay? So really, to summarize this, FME Server with versioning enabled, it provides an organization the perfect risk mitigation tool for dealing with the introduction of human errors that go on to break a workspace and or potentially risk all sorts of issues within an organization. So I like to say, without versioning, it's like hell on earth, okay? Moving on. So FME and unconventional thinking. So let's talk about the problems here. I mean, I've got lots of problems, okay, but let's talk about the main problems. So AWS is really convenient for me from a training perspective. I like to, and you'll see the way that I present as well, I try and accommodate for all the things that can go wrong, and you can't do everything, but I find AWS such a great thing to use because, you know, you make one machine and you want to make 8 copies of that, and you can do it down to the finite detail. And what that means for me as a trainer, when I'm training somebody and they got something that doesn't work, you know, they're on an exercise and it doesn't work for them, I can go, are you sure it's the machine? And they're like, yeah, I'm sure it's the machine. I don't know, but are you really sure it's the machine? And it's usually always human error, right? Because every one of the machines are all the same. Versus somebody that has their laptop, I can't always be confident that it's not a machine that's causing it, like it's a driver issue or either lack of memory or some, you know, some kind of interaction for something going on with the laptop as opposed to anything else. So anyway, back on point. So the from the AWS element, it's really helps me be able to give the best possible training that I can, right? And I'm certainly not perfect. So let's talk about some of the things I have to deal with. However, AWS comes with its quirks, right? And I'm going to go on to demonstration in a minute, and I'm going to show you. But some of the quirks, some of the quirks from that are related to IP address. So when you provision a machine, AWS associates an IP address with that. And the unfortunate thing is, if you then, once you're finished with your training for the day, you want to save money, so you turn off the machine. And then what it does is, it gives away that IP address. And that's okay though, because when you start to back up, it gets a new IP address, but it's not really, because it's got a new IP address. That means your server no longer matches what you have in your host file. You don't really want to have to go into every machine every single time you have to do that, and you've got 8 people on your course, maybe even 10 people on your course. It's a bit painful, okay? So, and there's a few other scenarios where this fits. So that's problem number 1. Problem number 2 is that it's a little bit simpler in a way. I set up a test environment in AWS. You know, I like to, you know, throw an environment together and throw away when I'm done with it, just to test out some functionality. And you know, sometimes you're doing some testing, and it's like, oh, why is this not working? Oh, that's right, I didn't have, you know, port 7078 open. Oh, I didn't have my port 80 open. Oh, I didn't have on whatever it is. So, you know, you've obviously got to have your firewall configured so that you can send emails and stuff and receive emails and all sorts of different things. Automations is a big one. So then I realized actually I could use FME and command line to be able to deal with that issue as well. So I'm just going to go onto screen mode, and I'm going to show you now what we can do. So here we go. Right, so this is my nice, lovely, clean AWS machine, unadulterated. We're going to pop to number 1. So what I have here is I have a workspace, and it's designed specifically to launch when the machine locks. When the user logs on, the automation will automatically run because it's set in a Windows task schedule. And then it will go in, it will do an IP config to text file. So this over here, you've got a creator, it'll run the command line IP config to text. Once I've got that text file into a known location, I'll read that file back in. And then I kind of really only want one line. I just need to know what my new IP address is. That's the only thing I care about. And then I'm going to clean it up, right? Because there's some junk in there that I don't want. And then I'm going to use a template to reassign that IP address into correct location in that host file. And I'm just going to overwrite the existing host file. So if I just show you what it looks like before and after. So if I go into my host file, here we go. So this is my previous host file. Okay, you can see that it was 172.31.23. And I think this is the recent one, 23.19. Yeah, so you can see that these are different, right? And obviously, when I log in, it does this automatically now. So I don't need to do it for this instance. But I'm going to run it. I'm going to show you. I'll just show you what it looks like. So I'll rerun this entire workspace. Here we go. So this is the file that's written. So let's have a look what the file looks like when we read it back in. So this is all the text line data. And this is the guy we want here, right? We want this IP4 address. Sorry, we want this here, okay? Because that's the IP address that's now been assigned to the machine. And the tester just selects that. I'm just pulling out that address. The string replacer is getting rid of all this junk beforehand. There's 3 or 4 different ways to do the same thing with FME. I've just really made it quite simple. And then the attribute manager, let's have a wee look inside this. So we go inside this, open up the text manager. Here we go. So this, you can see this, right? This looks very similar, doesn't it? Right? This looks just like that, right? But what I've done is I've assigned the values that are coming in. This value is obviously the IP address, and that's where that's going to go. Anyways, long story short, that runs it, overwrites my host file. And the great news is when that person logs in for the first time, I know 100% that when they go to the REST manager, so when they go in here, let's just do that. 1, that their training server will be pinging to the right, redirecting to the correct IP address, but 2, they'll be able to log in, right? Because if this didn't run, what would happen is you wouldn't be able to find your REST manager, okay? Because your DNS and your IP address wouldn't reconcile, so it would be no good to them or me. Okay, so that's just one handy way to deal with AWS. And look, that really it benefits me in a number of ways, because once I've cloned this machine, so once I clone this machine, I make 10 machines. It does it for all of my machines, right? And I log them. The next person a user logs on, it automatically does that for me. So I can pretty much do it and forget. But I'm a bit OCD, so even though I know that it does it, I like to check all my machines anyway. But it's one less thing to actually do. Now, if I wanted to get around that using AWS, I would actually use a thing called an elastic IP. An elastic IP is just the name given by AWS to assign a specific IP address to a machine. All right, and you don't lose it. But you only have 5. I've got quite a few machines on there that I like to spin up. And it costs money when you go more than 5. So it's a way to save money. All right, so then problem number 2. So let's have a wee look at this guy. Hopefully, so there we go. Last of that workspace there. And you can see as well, like, yeah, actually, this is a really good point. You notice Kieran's workspaces, you've noticed Gary's stuff that he does. You're like, we take a lot of pride in what we do, and you know, we don't just do like pretty bookmarks and annotation for you guys' benefit. Like we really, this is what we do, right? This is how we build a workspace. We do these things in our development cycle when we're doing incremental development. This is what we do, right? And it's hugely important that for everybody that works on a workspace, not just for everybody else's benefit on what a workspace does and what the different components are, right? But you know, not for other people, but also for yourself, right? Because I'll be honest, I look at a workspace 3 months later and I can't remember what I did. I remember it briefly, but it's really good to have that annotation to go through to help me out. Okay, so workspace number 2, right? I mean, I could actually probably, you know, Kieran mentioned about this earlier on about user parameters. You know, user parameters, you load them up to FME Server, you build an app, and those user parameters can be associated with your app as user input. But user parameters are used like in a number of different ways. And for this one, what I wanted to think about is maybe in every instance that I launch of AWS where I want to configure up my firewall, I don't want to open up all the ports in one go. And I can almost hear you say, you're looking at this going, but darn, right? There's a better way than having all your attribute creators like separate. You know what they say, you know, one transformer is better than many, but not in all instances, right? And the reason that I have multiple transformers here is because we're opening up different ports, and it's hugely important for me, right, to be able to see which ports these are. So if I zoom in on this, that's a good point. I probably never thought of that earlier on, sorry. So if I zoom in on this, you can see first one's port 80, this one's configuring port 8080. And we're using the same thing again. We're using command line, right? You know, that we're using the system caller, and we pass command line to the system caller, and it will go and apply that. And there's just so many different things you can do with that. It's just really pretty handy. And I'm not really a command line guru. I just go online, I Google up what it is to do something, and then I just make it happen. So let's talk about some of the things that happen. I mean, it's pretty simple, right? So we've got all these different ports. These are the common ports, you know, so your WebSocket 778 is your automations. It deals with your topics. And you can't listen to your topic, so it gets blocked if you don't have that on. IMAP 993, so if you're looking to receive emails, you need to have that one on. And yeah, and the list goes on. So there's a few different ones there, okay? But I want to have some configurability about this so that I don't necessarily do the same thing every time. I don't open up all the ports or none of the ports. I want to have some control on that, right? So in my user parameters here, I've got a couple of things. So I can configure whether or not a port's open or not, right? I can configure whether I want to add in a port or delete a port, right? And I'm either adding or deleting in one go, right? So I'm either, you know, adding 3 ports or deleting 3 ports, okay? So hopefully that gives you an idea. So then let's look at the attribute creator and see how it's configured inside that. So you can see, here's one example, right? They're all the same, right? Because there's 3 different variations that we're doing here, right? Number 1, we've got, all right, that's fine. So this one here, it's an add rule. So see, advanced firewall, add rule name, and then we've got like specific name that's been written in, and you know, it's formatted already. And then obviously if it's delete, so remember there's yes and add, right? So if the port is yes and the original command is to add that port, then it's going to run this command. If it's delete and yes, then it's going to run that command. And this one, obviously you can see, is delete that rule, okay? Why I might want to do that? Well, maybe I made a mistake or want to remove a port, and I can just do that without having to mess around, okay? So let's have it, and then obviously there's null, and null is, I don't want to do anything with that. Don't do anything, don't apply a value, and I'll use that test filter on the end to remove it, okay? So let's just have a look at what my firewall looks like now, right? So here's my firewall. Hopefully you can all see that. And you know, I actually have my port 80 open. I'm pretty sure that might be an FME thing when you actually install it. Actually does that, but yeah. Anyway, so there's no other there's no trickery going on here. There's no FME in here. All right. So what we're going to do is now we're going to run this, right? Rerun entire workspace. Let's have a look. Okay. Well, we don't want to delete. We want to add. there's no point, right? Well, we got 80 open, so let's open 80, right? And let's just say yes to all the rest. Okay, so here we go. We add, no, yes to all of them. Oh, we don't need to save that. And we're going to run that. The first test, is it going to work? Here we go. So now we're going to go onto here. I'm going to just click that, refresh it. Here we go. So we got IMAP 993, SMT 25, 465 587 7078. And that's just, look, and this is the thing, you know, FME blows my brains all the time of just how absolutely amazing it is, because I'm not a developer, you know, I suppose I'm a developer with FME, but, you know, like, I'm not a coder, I'm not a programmer, you know, I'm just somebody that's got really good with understanding processes and utilizing the ability of FME. And that really is, folks, the power there of being able to use FME. It allows you to do stuff that you had never been able to do before, but more importantly, not just do it, automate it, really help yourself, and then help other people and help grow your organization, right? Anyway, so I think that probably just summarizes just the handiness of FME. You know, think about it you can think about it for all the problems you've got within an organization. I'm not necessarily saying it's the right thing to use, but I'd probably say that if you're starting out with FME, every problem is a good problem to have a go at. You know, I would probably say that it's easier to start with smaller problems, you know, and no more different than incremental development, you know, incremental learning, right? You know, there's no point starting something big because you'll just be put off. But if you can break that big thing down into, you know, components that you can solve, and you, in your mind, you're piecing it together, it will really, really help you. Okay. All right. So let's get back to the slides. Here we go. All right, so yes, I like this. AWS Recognition Service Let's Play. See, this is the thing, right? With FME, you know, your work is like playing. It's like a computer game. It's like you actually solving problems is just so much fun, right? It's kind of so empowering in some way. Anyway, so some of the things you need to think about, so general points to consider when there's new transformers that come into place. And AWS recognition is no different from this. So you've got a new transformer, you've read about it, and you've gone, oh, wow, okay, AI or machine learning that can do object identification from images, or it can take an image to text. Oh, wow, that's great. I'm just going to put it in there and I'm going to make it work, right? Yeah, well, see, that's the bit that gets you, right? Because, you know, a couple of questions. Well, do you have to have an AWS account? Yes, you do. Huh. That might be a problem if you've not got an AWS account. That's okay. You go make an AWS account. And then it's like, it needs a security ID. It needs a token ID. What's this about, right? Oh, well, I don't know how to do that. And then you find yourself actually, you know, on YouTube, you're trying to find out how you do these things. So look, whilst it's obviously great and fantastic that these things come out, you know, there's usually more work that you have to do to get it to work, right? And then even once you've got past the credentials, even once you've, you know, you put a creator there, and I'm going to demonstrate the, you know, the thought process that goes through what you need to develop off the back of this, but more importantly, showing you a working example and all the things that you need to take into account for that to do what it needed, what it now does, you know, are really, really important. So, you know, really, will it just work when you put the transformer in and you've got all these credentials? Yeah, but no, okay, and I'll allude to that in a minute. So let's just get back into my little virtual machine here. Right, here we go. Okay, so this is what we would start with, right? This is we've got a creator, we've got the recognition connector there, right? And we've just set up a workspace ready to rock and roll, and then we found out we need an AWS account or whatever. Well, do you know what? I'm going to make your life easy, because I'm actually just going to show you how to do this, right? Because I know many of you, actually it's good to go and have a play with this, right? So if I just open up this recognition connector, you see, look, I need a web connection, so I'm going to need an AWS connection. So I'm going to show you what to do to set that up, and it really just takes a minute or so. Obviously, the prerequisite is you do need an AWS account. You need to be able to log in somewhere. So I'm just going to open that up now. Oh, actually, I've got it on this machine. Here we go. So I'm just assuming you've gone to AWS, you've created an account, now you're in your user console. This is the first thing, or management console, let's be specific, right? So it's the AWS management console. You're in there now, you're ready to rock and roll, right? But you have no idea what you're doing, right? So for the AWS recognition service, we need to be able to authenticate using FME, right? And where you do that is you go to, I mean, this is, by the way, Extreme X, that's my business. I use, this is my account for that. So you go into your, whatever your organization's name is, you go down to My Security Credentials, and then you go to Users, and you can see I've already got a couple in here. In fact, I was annoyed because, yeah, darn issue 101, I didn't have a web connection on one of my machines, and of course I needed to get that token information, and I was like, I didn't save it. So yeah, when you set up the token, save it in some safe place so you can always access it. I mean, it's no big deal, you have to go in and create a new one, but then yeah, it's just a bit of messing around, right? So anyway, so I want to go and add a user. Let's give it a name. So we'll call it World Tour. Oh, I might as well put 2020 on that, right? And what you're going to need to select is you're going to need to select programmatic access, permissions, and then you want to select attach existing policies directly. I'm going to do that. And then there's a whole load, right? But it's really good because you could search for that. So if I go recog, there we go. I never put the G on the end. But see how there's these different things here. So there's read-only access, service role. What you want is Amazon Recognition full access, right? I'm gonna hit next. And by the way, if you wanted to be able to connect to your S3 bucket, you could do the same. And you know, if you want to upload, you know, images to read from an S3 bucket, you do the same. But for now, I just need the recognition. All my images are stored locally just to make it nice and easy. I don't need to bother with that. And then I'm going to hit next. Create user. Here we go. There we go. We've got the user created now. So you can see a World Tour 2020 in this. Honestly, just remember, download it. Don't do what I did. So I could show that, copy that. I'm just going to hide it. And then I would copy and paste that information back into my transformer. So let's get back to the machine. Okay, so we've done all those bits and pieces, right? So we've gone in there, we've gone and created a web connection. The region's quite important. This is the closest region to me, which is South Pacific, Sydney. So I've selected that. And then in this instance, I've just selected a file, right? This is a local file. So if I open that up, and just to point out, so this is, so to understand why I want, what I'm going to do with this is, so back to my business, I like to be very organized. I like to have everything documented so that my GST returns and my invoices and my end of year and my reconciliation are just all nice and easy. And I use FME in so many different ways to do those things, right? But one of the things is, at the minute, it's a very manual task. I have everything digital. So I take a picture of any receipts that I get, and I upload them to OneDrive, and they go into a specific period, GST period, and then I name them. I name them what the company is, and I name them what the amount is. And that way, when it comes to the end of the period, what I do is I provide all those receipts as evidence to the GST man and say, look, here's all my big ones. And that's easy for me to sort out. But then importantly, then I can run FME that will go in and strip out all that information and reconcile with my MOIB account just to see if I missed any invoices. So if the tax man came to do like an audit on me, I know that I haven't missed any invoices because I've got them all. So, right, so, and now that we've got that out of the way, hopefully that makes sense. So this is the naming convention I use. And I wanted to be able to see if I could take a receipt that was on my phone and or on my computer and run it through this recognition service to see if I could extract. I mean, we start off, and we'll talk about that incremental development cycle, but I start off by seeing if I could extract the value of that receipt, okay? Because you've got to remember, right, when you get a new transformer, it's just one part, one very, very small part in a huge scale of processes that you have to do with FME to get the real thing that you want at the end of it, right? So let's make this quick because I think we're running a bit short on time here. So if I run this, let's have a look, see what we get, right? So we've got an image, it's going in there, and we're running it, take a couple of seconds. And here we go, we got 63 lines of information out here, okay? Let's have a look what this is. There we go. There's all the text. So this is all the input stuff, right? You've got GST number, phone number, and I can hear you now. You're starting to go, wow, this is awesome. Yes, it is, but we still not got to the point right yet. So we go through all this, and I noticed the first thing that comes out of this, I noticed that, oh, this might be the value here. You can see where I'm going with this. This might be the value, but I know it's not because it wasn't that amount. It's $122 something. I don't see the actual value in any of this, excuse me, in any of this text. So that's a problem. But then I also have another problem. It's like, wow, there's lots of information in here. How do I extract out that value? Okay, well, we're just going to skip forward. So incremental, and this is incremental development. It's like, let's have a look where the starting point is, and let's work from here. So the first thing I realized is that, we just get to this last workspace. So this is the final workspace, okay? What this will do, this will take any image that you supply to it, right? It will process that image, it will work out a bounding box, it will work out the rotation of that image, and then it will rotate that image depending. I'm going for portrait because most of my images are like that, and it will apply a rotation to it. It'll bring all that information back together. Then it will send it over to the recognizer service. But it will do one more thing, and that one more thing I'll clarify in a minute. Anyway, so once it comes back from the recognition service, then let's just zoom in a wee bit, just so it's a bit easier for everybody to see. So this is where you can see I've got a cloner in there. You might be wondering what I'm doing with a cloner, but we'll get to that in a minute. There's the recognition service, and then we've got like these. We've got filters, but they're all coming together. So this is really a visual cue for what's happening, where if the data is selecting my logic on how I want to select the data from all those list of rows, right? What's the commonalities between the receipts? Is there things that are common features that allow me to extract what that value might be? And then I need to clean up the data. So there's a couple of string replacers. And I'm going to attribute manager to assign information. Anyway, and then it's going to go through, and then it's going to send me an email and what the value is. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run this version. So it's the same file, BP $122.66. And it's going to run that. And I'll talk about this a little bit down the bottom here. This is just a kind of, and this is where to next. Now we're just going to zoom in here. We're only a couple more minutes, folks, and we're pretty much there. So now I'm going to click on this, and right, so here's the original file name. So you've got a comparison, okay? $122.66, and here we go, $122.86. Huh? So does that mean the file's not picked it up? Actually, no. So this is the interesting thing. It did it so well that the original file is $122.86. But I'd mistakenly labeled it $120.66. And I actually, just by chance, that was really cool. So here's the original C, right? So here we go, $122.86. So I'd actually named that file wrong. So that's pretty cool. You know, we've got a machine, a service with some configurations, some transformations. It can actually be more accurate than the mistakes you make, right? So that's pretty good. Anyway, so let's talk about some of the, let's make this quite brief because I think we're coming to the end of the presentation shortly. I really like this to get out of the way because it's really important, the things you need to think about. So the reason that this is different from the other one, I realized something quite specifically, and that's where this deals with it. So right now we have one image going through to the recognition service, and I realized, well, hey, look, that AWS is reading all this information off that receipt. It's a lot of information, right? It might be getting confused. Maybe I can simplify that a little bit. So how I simplify that is, what if I split the receipt into a number of components, right? So I don't know if anybody noticed when we ran the workspace, you see here, I've got divide the image into X number, okay? So I can divide it into 2, I can divide it into 3, I can divide it into 4, and so on, right? And I went with 4 because that's the most optimal, okay? So what I do here is I use a bounding box, then I work out all the extents, I create a cloner, and then I offset them into the correct position to cover that as a sheet of paper. So if we have a look at what that looks like, Here we go. That's what it looks like. And then I clip each one of these images by one of those boxes and send it to the recognition service. What a difference. So I can pretty much, I've got a whole host of receipts. I don't have time to show you, but I've got a whole host of receipts I can run this through, and it works every single time. So it goes to show that you really, this is the great thing about FME, and actually being able to use feature caching. You can just keep going at it and thinking about ways to overcome and solve and extract information and process information. And really, where does this go to next? Well, you can see I've got dev extract business name. Instead of me putting in the name originally that I was doing, I want to be able to extract that information, and I can do that by aggregating all the values together and having some kind of lookup table that's really set as conditional values. And now that will assign that for me. So like, this is part complete, but I think it's a really good example of the power of FME, the power of all these different transformers and connections that are taking place, but also just to bear in mind, there is a long hog ahead to being able to leverage those in the way that you want to be able to do them. All right, and look, I really think that's, I'll probably cutting it off just a little bit sooner, just because I know we're running short of time, but I'd just like to say thank you very much to everybody else. It's been an absolute pleasure having you all here, and a big, obviously a big wave from New Zealand, and yeah, I will hand it back to Ruby Donaldson. Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you, Darren. So we are getting close to kind of running out of time. We haven't had any questions come through as such for Darren. So I've spoken to Kieran about the demo that he was going to do, and I think what we might do is he's going to put some steps together and upload the demo to the website. And so if anyone's interested in seeing that and understanding the process he went through, that'll be available there. Also, all of the slides and the demos from today in the workspaces will be uploaded for your use. So a couple of people have asked that question so far. So if you're looking for some follow-up resources, we've got, obviously you can access, there's quite a few options to access free FME licensing at the moment. There's obviously a home license that Darren touched on. There is the COVID-19 licenses that Safe Software are making available to people. So definitely reach out to us if you want to take advantage of those resources. We also provide temporary licensing through Locus. So if you are going to upgrade to FME 2020 and you need some licenses to support you in doing that, we can definitely help you. The other thing we have going is some virtual training that Darren is running. So that's been available for a few weeks now. I
think Ruby's cut out.
Cutting down into the 3 sessions over 2 weeks generally, but we're sort of working in with what the client.
I think you're back now.
Did it cut me out?
Yeah, you're back now. Maybe last 20 seconds.
Okay.
I couldn't tell if it was just me. Sorry.
I think we've done okay considering we have kids in the background and that sort of thing. So before we have real technical issues, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please do head to the website and vote for any of the additional webinars that you'd like to see. We're really interested in putting out as much content as we can. And we're available to work with you on anything specific in terms of what we're doing with FME in your industry with other clients, and can just help you and support you in that way. So thanks very much, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks, folks. Cheers.
Thank you, too.